Easy peeps. I want to share another video with you today, and I want to talk today about perspective. Now, the way that I see it is that our only possession is our perspective. And what I mean by that is, how I see things as an individual is going to be different to how somebody else sees things. Now, it's fair to say that some of the things that I might see and I might explain and describe, you might be able to relate to. People might be able to relate to some of the things that I say. People might be able to relate to, certain elements of my perspective. But then, by the same token, there are going to be certain things that I say that certain people aren't going to be able to relate to. That you're not going to be able to relate to. So this makes my perspective unique to me as an individual. I've spoken before about the source and a single point perspective, which is where all perspectives come from, and ultimately is where all perspectives lead to. In from this perspective, it's to associate this single point perspective as coming from a single mind. And I've said before, I call it the great mind. So if you imagine that there's one mind and we all share this one mind, and this one mind is infinite. So what that means is there are infinite possibilities within this one mind, and each one of us as individuals represent one of these infinite perspectives that emanate from the great mind. So, there's I want to refer to the Bible, the first book of the Bible, the book of Genesis. And, I've been, in my contemplations and my meditations and stuff, certain things have come to me that I want to share. And, as I say all the time, this is how I see things. This is, and this is what I speak about. It's entirely up to you how you want to see it. If you disagree with me or whatever, it's, that's your perspective and it's your prerogative. But I look at the Bible and I came to the point of realizing that the first book of the Bible, the book of Genesis, and obviously it goes on about how God created the world and God created everything and so on and so on. But then we come to when God created Adam, and God placed Adam in the Garden of Eden. Then God created Eve from Adam, and then the two of them were in the Garden of Eden. And as the story goes, and I'll sort of break it down quite basic. There's two trees in the Garden of Eden. There's the tree of knowledge of good and evil, which I translate to being the tree of judgment. And then there's the tree of life. I believe it's called the tree of life. So there's two trees in the Garden of Eden. And according to the Bible, God instructs Adam and Eve not to eat from the tree of knowledge, or the tree of judgment. Now, the Bible then goes on to say that a serpent tempted Eve to eat from the tree of knowledge and told Eve that if you eat from the tree of knowledge, you won't die, you will see as God sees. And then it goes on to say that Eve sought the fruit on the tree and she desired the fruit on the tree, so she ate the fruit, and then she gave Adam the fruit. They both ate the fruit, and then subsequently what follows is God then comes back into the Garden of Eden, and Adam and Eve both hide from God because they were naked and they didn't want God to see them naked. God immediately puts two and two together, and he realizes that they've eaten from the tree of judgment. And now and this is where, the story, if you like, it sort of takes a bit of a twist, because according to the story, at this point, God punishes Adam and Eve for eating from the tree of judgment. And their punishment is that they are sent out of the Garden of Eden, and from sent out of the Garden of Eden to work and to till the land and all the rest of it. But before all of that, God then reels off all of this stuff, which is seen as God's punishment to Adam and Eve. Now, the way that I see it is that, this story, although we don't, a lot of people claim to not believe in God, and, you've got all these different perspectives and stuff about God. But the way that I see it is this story, it's kind of like, it's kind of showing us something. Okay. What it's showing us, what I realize is that when we decide to remove our judgments of the story, okay, so the judgments meaning, the good and the bad, what is sort of depicted as being good and bad in the story. The good is the opportunity for Adam and Eve to be in the Garden of Eden. The bad is obviously them going against God's wishes and eating from the tree and then being banished from the garden and so on. I kind of see it from a different perspective. What I realized is, in reading the story, is that God speaks of what is kind of depicted as being God's punishment on Adam and Eve is actually, from my own perspective, is God basically telling Adam and Eve what is going to be their experience from that point on. And, the experience actually started the moment that Eve desired the fruit. That was the beginning of the experience. So everything that God then said, you're going to experience this is going to happen, you're going to live multiple lives, and you're going to die, and all this kind of stuff. All of this was God trying to say in a roundabout way, now you've eaten from the tree, this is going to be your experience for eternity. Now, that to me doesn't mean that God was punishing Adam and Eve, because then the story actually goes on to say that God then made Adam and Eve some clothing, because obviously they could see themselves as being naked. God made them, Adam and Eve, some clothing, and he sent them forth into the beyond the Garden of Eden to work. Okay. Now, the first thing that I realize is, if God was really punishing Adam and Eve, then why did he make them clothing? Okay, because, from my perspective, if to add to that punishment would have been to say, right, well, all right, then, if you see yourself as naked, that's fine. Get out of the garden. Go and do some work. Okay? Now, so for me, if it was actually a punishment, then God probably would not have made them clothing. In that act, it's like there's an element of forgiveness there. There's an element of God saying, okay, if you see yourself as being naked, then I'm going to make you some clothes. That's in God's power. Basically, God can do anything. God can make clothes out of thin air if he wants to, according to the Bible's description of God. Now, I'm going to take it a bit further now. And the way that I see it is that, we've kind of been taught to associate masculinity and femininity with male and female. So myself being male, I represent masculinity, the woman represents femininity, basically. And what I did myself is I kind of cross-referenced this whole sort of story with some Buddhist teachings, and particularly Taoism, and the description of yin and yang. And I'm not going to go too deep into the yin and yang, but basically it's the law of opposites, as I like to explain it. It's like saying, if you have this, then you must have that. Okay, and each one of these things, this and that, they balance each other out. So in the with regards to with humanity, you have masculinity, you have femininity. Each one of these balances each other out. But then what yin and yang also goes on to say about masculinity and femininity is masculinity is associated with activeness and being active. Femininity is associated with passiveness and being passive. So now I cross-reference this with the Garden of Eden, and what this now says to me is that in truth, Adam and Eve could actually be one individual. Okay, now I'm explaining this the best as I can, and I hope it I hope it makes as much sense as it sounds like it does to me. So Adam and Eve could actually be one person, and in this, as an individual person, as an individual human being, and also referring to the great mind and to oneness. Now, in oneness, a thought in its nature is passive. Okay, we all experience a multitude of thoughts, potentially millions of thoughts or thousands of thoughts in a day. And in that respect, we don't engage every single thought. A thought comes and a thought goes. Some thoughts come, we focus on these thoughts, and these thoughts then become our action, albeit either an outwardly physical action or an action within the body. So what I mean by that is we engage the thought, and that engagement causes our mind, our brain, to release certain neurosignals that go through our body, and we have this bodily experience. And this is something that we can all relate to. It's like, if you are, you might be sat in a quiet room, you're all on your own, sat in a room, and a thought pops into your head, and then suddenly you smile. Okay, you smile to yourself, or you might actually physically laugh. But either way, this is an action of the body. The body is reacting to that thought. So that means that you've engaged a thought, your body reacts to that thought. Or obviously the outward sort of action is when we physically do something. So you think about something, you actually physically respond to that thought by doing something, by taking action. So in this respect, thought in its nature is passive and feminine. Okay, and action in its nature is active and masculine. So going back to the Garden of Eden, now if we see one individual, be it male or female, in the Garden of Eden, and this single individual has a passive thought, or has a thought, and in focusing on that thought becomes active and leads this individual to act upon that thought. Now, where in the Garden of Eden, when Eve desires the fruit, and disregard the serpent for a moment, Eve desires the fruit. Okay, so this was Eve's judgment. and in desiring the fruit, she took steps to eat the fruit. So this, in this moment, we see both masculinity and femininity at play, working together, okay, and taking the fruit from the tree of judgment. And from that experience, the first thing that happened was that both Adam and Eve, they saw themselves as naked, and they judged this perspective. They judged what they saw, and in making that single judgment, this was the like the beginning of the experience of judgment for the individual, or for Adam and Eve, however you want to see it. This was the beginning of judgment. And from that very first judgment, it's like opening the door. All things have to be judged. This is the experience from eating from the tree of judgment. Now, as the story continues, God sent them out of the Garden of Eden, and he placed, as it says, cherubims or something either side of the gates of the Garden of Eden, guarding the gate. Now, what I see here is that the cherubims are this is sort of kind of showing us that because we do not know ourselves in truth, then we will look at these cherubims as being something to fear. Okay? Now, it's important to understand that the moment that the moment that Adam and Eve chose to eat from the tree of judgment, they chose the idea of fear. It's like you're either fearful or you are faithful, full of faith or full of fear. And so the moment that they ate from the tree, they opened the door to their fears. Okay? The first thing they feared was God, so they hid from God. And so what this is trying to say to me now is that because they made this step of choosing to be judgmental, because the tree of knowledge of good and evil, or the tree of judgment, means that you choose to embrace the knowledge of judgment. Okay, so that means this becomes your the center point of your belief system. So as again, in the center of the garden is the tree of life, of eternal life, or however it's described. But then there is the tree of knowledge of good and evil. So in eating from the tree of knowledge of good and evil, now it's like embracing this idea of judgment. Okay, and so what this means is that everything in their experience they're going to judge. So then when God says, right, from now on you're going to experience this, you're going to experience that, you're going to experience pain, you're going to experience pleasure, you're going to experience life, you're going to experience death, blah, 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 blah. What God is trying to say is, because you have chosen this perspective, this judgmental perspective, you're going to judge everything. It's a necessity. You can't just judge one thing. You have to judge everything. It's part and parcel of eating from this tree. It's part and parcel of acquiring this knowledge. Okay? So, what this perspective does for me is it completely reverses this whole idea that the woman is seen as the misleader, if you like, of man. Okay, we've got this whole idea from the Bible. Most people, when speaking of God, they'll refer to God as He. God is a He. This perspective that God is a He. Now, okay, let's take it down the route of the masculinity and femininity. God creates. God does things. God acts. Okay, so in the respect of masculinity and femininity, of being active and passive, the God as depicted in the Bible is very active, very masculine. Okay. Now, this whole perspective as I started to see it, is that, I've come to this point of realizing that, I hear a lot of people say, and I've said it myself in the past, that this is an illusion and that's an illusion, this isn't real, that's not real, and so on and so on. Now, in reality, everything is an illusion. There isn't many different illusions. There is one illusion, and that one illusion encompasses all things. All things are a part of that one illusion. And that one illusion is your perspective. Basically, the way that you see it, the way that you choose to see reality. Now, in the tree of life, for me, it represents eternal life. It represents an end to suffering. To eat from the tree of life is to acquire true source knowledge. Okay, so there's no judgment attached to the tree of life. There is truth. There is absolute. There is source knowledge. Call it divine knowledge. Call it anything, whatever you choose to describe it. I call it source knowledge. And source knowledge, it shows you everything. It shows you what things are. It shows you what things are in truth. Okay. Now, when I say things, I mean all things. Another thing that I've read a few times here and there, and I've heard people say it often enough, and it was like an integral part of my journey, if you like. And it's this statement: question everything. Now, when I first started sort of opening up to truth, I was reading books. I'm picking up this book, I'm reading in that book, I'm finding this out, I'm looking into that, I'm following this course of process of thought, and examining that sort of process, and and it sort of became a process of elimination. But then I came across one thing, and and I've spoke about this before. I was reading a book called I'm Okay, You're Okay, and it's about transactional analysis. And I don't know, some of you might be aware of transactional analysis. Just a book that I bought, and I was reading it. And in reading this book, I'm looking at the world. I'm looking outside of myself, and I'm saying to myself, yeah, I see this, I've experienced that, I've seen this, I've been through that. But then I got so far into the book, and something sort of triggered inside me that made me, instead of looking at the world, I started to look at myself. And this was like the beginning of my path to truth, to ultimate truth. This was the point that I realized, that there are many truths that we can speak of. You could say that's true, that's false, that's true, that's false, blah, 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 blah. But then this sort of turnaround, this revolution, was like me suddenly realizing that that all of the things that I was looking at were actually the experiences that I was having through placing myself in certain environments and in certain places. So what I started to do was I started to question myself. And this is what I realized is, when you start to question everything, the first place that you should start is to question yourself. This is the most important thing. Question yourself. And, it's like, to question everything, you could never question everything. You could never question everything. You think about it, you stand in a single room, right, in your own house, and you look around your house, you look around this room, look at all of the things that are in this room, and there are so many things to see, that where would you begin questioning? And in reality, questioning everything means literally questioning everything. Question every rock and every stone, your skin and every, your bone. Question absolutely everything, because what you're actually looking for is is the knowledge that these things can present to you. Okay, now in questioning everything, you can be questioning things till the day that you die, and you can never be satisfied, because you will never question everything. It's as simple as that. But then if you question yourself, then it is yourself that is the key to everything. So basically, it's like it's like reversing the whole process and simplifying the whole process. And and that word itself is the key word. It's simplicity. It's finding a way to simplify things. So for me, going back to the whole Garden of Eden thing, when I started to see that all things are within the mind, I don't have my own mind. I have access to the mind. As I've said before, I have access to the mind. I don't have my own mind. And I know now that just that single piece of information is extremely liberating. Because when you know that you don't have your own mind, you also know that the mind can't be a problem. It can never be a problem. If the mind is a problem, then every one of us is going to have a problem. It's as simple as that. Okay? Not only is every one of us going to have a problem, but every one of us is going to have the same problem. It's not the mind that's the problem. It's the way that we use the mind that's the problem. So going back to the Garden of Eden thing, if I now see that the tree of knowledge and eating from the tree of feasting from the tree of knowledge leads me to be judgmental, then that means that everything about my experience, I'm going to judge it as good or bad, right or wrong, and so on. On the other hand, if I feast from the tree of life, then everything about my experience is just what it is. There's no need for me to label it as good, bad, right or wrong or whatever. It's just part of the experience. And every part of the experience is in place for me to learn and to grow. Okay? So it's like, this whole thing about the Garden of Eden, the way that I see it now is the Garden of Eden is your mind. It's the mind. Okay? The Garden of Eden is the mind. The tree of knowledge is your conscious mind, and the tree of eternal life is like the pathway, the gateway to the mind. Okay? The more you feast from the tree of life, the more the gates become open to you. The more you see truth, the more you see the end of suffering, because humanity is suffering. Humanity is suffering. We suffer on a daily basis, and what we suffer is through not knowing, right? Suffering is the result of not knowing. It's the result of not knowing what's to come. It's the result of not knowing what's going to happen next. It's the result of not knowing the answer to something. It's the result of not knowing. So, think about it in sort of simple terms. If you lose your keys, your house keys, you're in the house, all the doors are locked, and you've lost your keys, right? You suffer because you can't get out of the house. So this is the panic, this is the blind frustration and everything. This is the suffering because you can't find your keys. If you lose something, you suffer because you can't find it. If you don't have the information that you need for something important, as you see this important thing, this important task or whatever, then there's an element of suffering there because you need this so that you can progress, so that you can move forward. If your thoughts are somewhere in the future, what's going to happen tomorrow? You don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. So there's an element of suffering there. if you don't know where your next meal is going to come from, there's suffering there. Suffering is to not know. The end to suffering is to cease the judgment, is to cease from eating from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Now, as I say, the Garden of Eden, as I see it, is the mind. Now, the tree of knowledge of good and evil, this is everything that we have been educated with. It's all the information that we've learned consciously. Okay, so all this information, when you really stop and think about it. So we've got all this information, and we use this information. We use all this learned knowledge. We use all this learned knowledge to understand our reality. Okay, so as an example, if you let's say you're in college or at school or whatever, or you might be sitting in your own home and you're trying to learn something, you're figuring something out, you're reading a book or whatever, and you come across something, and it's something that you don't understand. The first thing that we do is we go through all this conscious information that we have. We refer to this conscious information that we have to bring us the answers to this problem that we need to resolve. Now, this information that we have, it's quite vast, but at the same time, it's extremely limited. Extremely limited. The reason why it's limited is because there is only so much knowledge, so much information that you can retain. Not only is there only so much information that you can retain, but there are there's only so far that you can go to describing something until you start referring to something else. So it is like, for example, you might look at a fish, and this fish will have its own description, but that description, within that description are references to other things. So it might be a colour, which is a reference to another thing. It might be the way it looks, which is a reference to something else. It might be its size, which is a reference to something else. Everything about the fish is a reference to something else. So basically we're using learned knowledge to understand the fish. Okay. Now, from the tree of eternal life sort of perspective, okay, I call it a fish, but that doesn't remove the fact that it is what it is. It's only a fish because I choose to call it a fish. I've been taught that it's a fish. I will refer to it as a fish, but that doesn't mean that it's a fish. Okay, so this is what the tree of knowledge, and the difference between the tree of knowledge and the tree of eternal life. The tree of eternal life basically means that we see the world, we see all things beyond their concept, beyond the conceptual thought of this object, of this thing. And beyond this conceptual thought, this thing, it represents absolute truth. Okay? It represents absolute truth. Every single one of us represent absolute truth. And it can get quite complex. It can become quite, even to sort of speak about it, it can become quite complex. So, I'm trying to keep it as simple as possible. But, as simple as to say that to feast from the tree of eternal life is to remove the restrictions, to remove the limitations, to remove the barriers, the barriers that exist between us as individuals, the barriers that exist between us and the rest of the world, the universe, if you like. To remove the barriers is to cease feasting from the tree of judgment and to begin to feast from the tree of eternal life. Now, this process in itself, the cherubims, as I said before, in the Garden of Eden, God placed these cherubims either side of the gates of the Garden of Eden. Now, this is symbolic to me in that what these cherubims represent. Different Bibles speak of it in different ways and stuff. But these cherubims represent our perspective and the way that we see things, because we've eaten from this tree of knowledge, because we've acquired this knowledge and we believe in this knowledge. The cherubims basically represent our fears. So what it means is we look at the cherubims as being sort of demonic in some respects, a place that we can't venture. We don't want to go through the gates of the Garden of Eden because there's these demon-looking things either side of it. But then when you cease to eat from the tree of judgment, when you cease to be judgmental, and now you look at the cherubims, you're not going to see them as demons, you're not going to see them as something to be feared, you're just going to see them as what they are. Things, if you like, things at either side of the gate. They represent your fears. And when you no longer choose to entertain your fears, they're no longer demons anymore. They're no longer guarding the gate. You walk freely into the Garden of Eden. And there, in the middle of the Garden of Eden, is the tree of eternal life. The punishment, as it says in the Bible, of that God gave to Adam and Eve is basically, as I see it, God saying to Adam and Eve, right, you've eaten from the tree. So now you've eaten from the tree of knowledge. You no longer see yourselves as one in me, as one in God, as one in all things. You see yourselves as separate. You've separated yourself from all things. Okay, so now you've separated yourself from all things. You're going to develop this perspective. Okay, you're going to develop this perspective, but in reality, this perspective that you're going to develop, it's paradoxical. You've created this reality. You've created these scales. You've created this yin and yang, if you like, and the problem with this creation is now you see yourself as one side of the yin and yang, which means that you are always going to be out of balance. You see yourself as masculine or feminine. You see yourselves as naked or clothed. You see yourselves as right or wrong. You see yourselves as just or unjust. And all of these things that come about through acquiring the knowledge of judgment. Now, when you really stop and think about it, it's I have my perspective, and my perspective, it's the only thing that I have. Okay, and it sounds crazy, but it's the only thing that I have. And the reason why it's the only thing that I have is because I know now that nothing that I possess, nothing that I have purchased, nothing that I own or anything like that, in absolute truth, it means nothing to me. Okay, it's a kind of a necessary part of my journey through life. But on my deathbed, when I come to the end of this life, none of these things, none of my possessions are going to mean anything to me. They're not going to mean anything. They're not going to mean anything to me that, to the people that I leave them to, that sort of take them over after I die. They might mean a little bit of something to them as sentimentality or what have you. But most of the things, they're just going to take it to jumble sale, they're going to throw it away, they're going to get rid of it, whatever. It doesn't mean a single thing, okay? Even those sentimental things that other people might hold on to, they don't mean anything in reality. They mean something to this individual for the time being, but then they're going to go through the process of dying, and if they've still got my sentimental things, somebody else is going to look at them and think, well, that don't mean anything, and they're going to bin it or whatever. So all of these physical, material things, in truth, they don't mean anything. They are a necessary part of my journey, yes, but in absolute truth, they don't mean anything. And and so I sort of strip it down to my perspective. And my perspective, this is my only possession in reality. And, this is and being my only possession, this perspective, it contains everything about me. It contains the way that I see myself. It contains my personality, the way I see my image, the way I see the world. Okay? Without this perspective, then I'm lost. Okay? I can't, communication and all these things, to be able to speak to people and so on and so forth. I've built this perspective over my years and throughout my lifetime, and I've come to in a roundabout way, depend on this perspective. So this is the most important thing to me. And so what I start to realize is that I look at my perspective. I look at all of the things, that come to making my perspective, and the judgments that I've placed on things, the way that I've chosen to see things in the past, the way that I've chosen to think about things in the past, all of these things that have made up my experience. And the thing is with perspective is, as I said before, is it's an individual thing. We all share bits and pieces of our perspective and stuff, but for the main part of our perspective, it's a personal thing, okay? And in having that personal perspective, if I attach myself to this personal perspective, if I maintain that everything that I think is truth, then this is my continual feasting from the tree of knowledge. This is my continual attachment to my my conscious education. Okay. Now, the moment I decide to let go of my perspective, or the moment that I at least decide to say to myself, well, maybe there's another way of looking at this. Maybe everything that I've come to accept as being truth and as being right, as being good, maybe I've got it all sort of upside down. Maybe there's another way of looking at it. Just by sort of being open to that idea is like standing in front of the gates of the Garden of Eden, okay, and looking at these sort of demonic looking figures and saying to yourself, maybe they're not as frightening as I've thought all along. Maybe I can approach these figures and maybe they'll let me through the gate. Maybe there's an opportunity for me to eat from the tree of eternal life. So, I was saying before, and I sort of kind of wandered off track a bit, where God says to Adam and Eve, now you've eaten from this tree, this is going to be experienced from this point on. You're going to experience multiple deaths and so on and so on, and I'm just going to single that part out. As a spiritual being, it's my belief that spiritually, I have had a multitude of different experiences. And each one of these experiences has been an opportunity for me to become closer to source, closer to wholeness, closer to oneness. This is my belief. I can look at life, and the things that I used to say shouldn't have happened, the things that I used to say about my life were wrong and I should have never had these experiences, and so on and so on. I can now look at these experiences and I can say to myself, well, actually, each one of these experiences were necessary. If they weren't necessary, then they wouldn't have happened. So what was the necessity? And the necessity was for me to learn something. And, I've come to this point of realizing that there's only one thing in reality that's actually worth learning. And that is the truth about yourself. Because that truth is, it's the path of peace. Okay? It's the path of inner peace. It's the path that you walk to free yourself. The moment that you begin to learn that truth of who you are, and not who you are according to what everybody else says, not who you are according to what I say, but who you are according to what you know. I can say 1,000,001 different things right now, and like I say, you might relate, you might understand, you might accept or whatever, but the bottom line is, this is purely my perspective. Who you are, this is this is what liberates us. We've been given all of this information, which, as I see it now, we go through life and we're like, well, this is true, that's false, and I've participated in conversations in the past where I've spoken among friends and people who I know and stuff, and we've said that we've spoken about knowledge and information and the way that we've been educated, and how we shouldn't have been educated in this way, and this is wrong, and so on and so on and so forth. Now I personally see things like this. Every single thing that we experience in our life is a necessary part of the journey, okay? And it's a necessary part of the journey, and it's necessary for us to experience it in this particular way because of the way that we have experienced in past lives on a spiritual level. So, okay, I might have had physical experiences in past lives, as a soul. My soul might have had physical experiences in past lives, and my deeds in my past lives and my past experiences, my karmas, they are presented to me in this life experience in a multitude of different ways. I can't say how these karmas are going to be represented to me. And, in this respect, it's like, because I have these experiences, so now I come into this life, every element of my physical presence and my physical life in this life is the result of karmas. It's the result of actions taken. It's the result of intensified thought. It's the culmination of past experiences. Okay, now the way that I see it is there has to be certain elements in place for you to experience certain karmas. Okay, so it's like, again, in the past I might have experienced something and said, oh, that was a coincidence, or I can't believe that, or all of these things that we disregard as being coincidental. But now I see that these coincidences are actually part of the learning experience. Okay, so these coincidences are actually a necessary part of my karmic experience. So it's like a certain combination of things that are necessary for me to experience my karmas. Okay. So and all of this that I see now, it comes from the tree of knowledge. You know, our whole karmic experience, our whole physical experience, and the way we perceive our experience, the way we judge our experience, is all based around this principle of eating from the tree of knowledge. So now to feast from the tree of eternal life, it's like you see this experience for what it is. It is what it is. It is what it is before you decide to say what it is. Okay? So, you know, as I said before, I can say a multitude of different things. I can say this is that and that is this and so on and so forth. But it's by the by. It's the fact that I'm saying it doesn't mean that that's what it is. You know, these are simply the suggestions. And this is our educational process. We go through a process of education from being infants till throughout our lives, we're educating ourselves, we're being educated. But the way that I see it is it's important to realize that all the information that we're given is suggestive. Okay? It's suggested to us. You know, I think I said in an earlier video, you know, we go through this process of learning where it's like we're shown an object and then we're told what it is, you know, and that's the beginning of our process of learning. Object, explanation. A is for apple, so you're shown an apple and you're told A is for apple. Okay, so throughout the process of your growth, you associate the two together. A is for apple, B is for ball, C is for cat, D is for dog, E is for egg or whatever, elephant or, you know. But that's the process that we follow. But this process is suggestive, okay? It might appear that we're being told that that's what it is. But in truth, it's just a suggestion. We're just given suggestions. What makes the difference is how we attach ourselves to these suggestions. And yet, it's fair to say that we're given this information at such a young age. We put our faith in our elders and our teachers and so on at this young age because we don't know any different in that respect. So we take this information on board. But we still reach an age where we can question this information. You know, and, you know, it's like now for me to do this video and for me to speak in this way, you know, this is possible now, and it's so much easier for me to do this because of the way that things have developed. You know, we call it progress, if you like, because of the way that things have progressed. You know, gives me the opportunity to do these videos and to speak in this way. It gives me the opportunity to share what I am currently learning, what I am beginning to see for myself, you know, but I can't emphasize this enough. It's not enough for you to just listen to what I'm saying and dismiss or accept and believe and all the rest of it. You know, it's something that we have to examine for ourselves. And then, you know, on this, this path of examination, if you like, you know, I've come to sort of realize that we have, you know, you've probably heard the saying, "Don't let your head rule your heart." Now, what I've come to learn is that your heart knows. Your heart knows truth. Your heart knows peace. Your heart knows love. Your whole heart knows all of the qualities of divinity, if you like, all of the qualities of absolute truth are within your heart. It's like, again, a quote from the Bible. Jesus said, words to the effect of, "The kingdom of heaven is within you." Now, this is like saying God is within you. Okay, it's important to realize what this means. You know, the moment that you mention God to some people, you know, that a lot of people tend to clam up and sort of shut down about this word God. And, you know, in all fairness, that's all it is. It's a word. It's a word that implies something. Now, for me, a part of my questioning was to figure out what this word meant. And as I've obviously spoken about the Garden of Eden and stuff, the way that I see the Bible is that the Bible speaks of God in two ways. There is the God that is love, and there is the God that is the judge. Okay. Now, the God that is the judge, this idea of God sort of emulates from the tree of knowledge. Okay. The God that is love, this idea of God emulates from the tree of life, of eternal life. Now, I've spoken before in another video about karma, and a common belief is that when you die, you either go to heaven or you go to hell. If God thinks that you're worthy, he's going to let you through the gates of heaven. If you don't think you're worthy, you're going to see his nemesis, the devil sort of thing. You go into the hound of hell and all that kind of stuff, pitchfork and all the rest of it. Now, I sort of question this whole idea of God and the devil. And for me now, if I am to follow this perspective of God, and God is the creator of all things, okay? But again, as Jesus says in the Bible, the kingdom of heaven is within you. God is within you, okay? If God created all things and God is within you, then you create all things through the power of God that is within you. Okay, all of these things, as I'm speaking now, they all return you back to the source, to oneness, to knowledge of the great mind, back to the Garden of Eden, and back to the Garden of Eden, back to source, back to one. God is within you. If you shut God out, this is like saying, I'm going to feast from the tree of knowledge, okay? And in shutting God out, you suffer. You suffer because you are shutting out the essential part of your being, which for me is the knowledge in your heart, okay? They're saying, as I said before, don't let your head rule your heart. This is like saying to me, don't let your judgments rule your life. So don't let the tree of knowledge rule the tree of life. Okay? And and it's like, going back to what I was saying at the beginning about masculinity and femininity, it's like, we've grown with this concept of, if you like, the woman misleading man. We've grown with this concept of the woman misleading man right from the Garden of Eden, right? And and I've read a few other books and stuff, religious sort of books and so on and so on, and it's a common sort of concept that the woman is the misleader of man. In reality, it is thought that is the misleader. It is the femininity of humanity, which is thought. Thought is the feminine part of our minds, okay? And if you engage that thought, you either engage that thought to do good, or you engage the thought to do evil, okay? And it's as simple as that, So this whole, basically the gist of this whole thing is that within every single one of us, within the whole of humanity, there is our masculinity and there is our femininity, okay? God, to me, is non-gender specific. That means God isn't forced to be male, God isn't forced to be female. God is nature itself, and nature itself is male or female, it's masculine or feminine. Nature itself finds a way to balance itself out. If I am constantly living in this idea that I am male, masculine, I have to do masculinely things and I have to stick to this sort of arrangement, then I'm always going to find myself out of balance. The moment that I become more aware of my femininity, if you like, and I'm sort of, like I say, I'm keeping it simple. I'm just speaking about thought and action. Masculinity and femininity, it plays a key role throughout every aspect of our lives, in truth. But that's something that you can sort of examine for yourself. But it's to understand that that now I see it from this perspective. It means that it's not the woman that misleads the man. It's not the woman that's misleading. It's the thought within the individual that has the potential to mislead. And this same thing exists in both male and female. So again, you look at the male and the female. Both the male and the female, we have the passive thought, the feminine part of the mind. We have the action on thought, which is the masculine part. Okay? And it's just about finding the balance. It's just about finding and understanding how it all sort of plays out, and it's about stripping away the layers, and as I've said before, stripping away the layers and simplifying our reality. And the more I sort of I open up to it, the more that I see that this is the path to end suffering. This is what Buddha spoke of. This is what the Tao Te Ching speaks of. This is what the Bible, in a roundabout way, speaks of. This is what every religious book, as far as I'm concerned, speaks of. To outwardly dismiss religion and to say it's wrong, it's bad, it's this, it's that, it's a control mechanism, as I've heard in so many cases, and it's blah 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 blah. To outwardly look at it like that without actually going in and giving it some examination, true thorough examination, this is ignorance in itself. To dismiss something that you haven't given any sort of true thought, any individual thought. Most of us, we basically take on board what other people say and we use that as our own thoughts. This is ignorance. This is the blind leading the blind. When we can take that step to take this information, to take that religious book, to take this quote or this thing that somebody else has told us, or these ideas that we get, or wherever this information comes from, when we can take a step back and we can question it, we can examine it, and we can learn to understand this from beyond our conscious mind and our conscious education, our conscious awareness. It's opening up to the universe of wisdom. As I've said before, when we become open to this universe of wisdom and we begin to see things from this wisdom perspective, all of these elements start to fall into place. This has been my cycle. This has been my journey so far, to understand all of this. And I know that I might have wandered off, and I might have gone in all kinds of tangents and so on and so forth. The best thing to do, as I can suggest, is to just focus on little bits of what I've said, rather than trying to pull it all together and follow it from sort of A to B or from start to end and trying to make sense of the whole thing. Just take bits of it out and analyze it in that way. Question everything that I say, but question what I'm saying from your own perspective, from beyond this the knowledge that you have been given. Okay, that's how I see it. It's like, you can question everything that I've said with your educated idea of what's right and what's wrong. So all you're actually doing is like everything that I'm saying, you've got a textbook with all of this information in it, and you're cross-referencing everything that I'm saying with this textbook. That's what effectively what you do when you question everything with your educated mind. So it's to take it a step further than that. My whole outlook is towards liberation. It's about finding that peace of mind, and it's about knowing that peace of mind, and and coming to the realization that there's a process. You have to follow a process. You have to follow this process of elimination. It's like, first there's the elimination of the information that you've been given. Basically it's like separating the wheat from the chaff, if you like. But then, that process follows on into your actions and your habits and your experience as a whole. And this is the revolution. This is true revolution for me. This is true revolution. Revolution is a personal thing. Okay, it's a personal thing. As individuals, we turn around our perspective. We start to see things from a different way. That revolution is the turnaround. I can't turn people's perspectives around. I can't say to you, don't see it like this, see it like that. First thing you're going to do is put a resistance. You're going to, who do you think you're talking to? Shut your mouth, or whatever. That's not wise. So this is my whole point. It's something that we must learn for ourselves. There's the door. You make the choice to walk through it. And once you walk through that door, everything is your responsibility. Everything becomes your responsibility. You become responsible for yourself, and that's all it boils down to. But there was something that I wanted to share with you actually on before I finish this video, and I suppose it's like a life hack. I think that's what they call them, into where you find something that you might find beneficial in life. I've done a lot of they might be perceived as being crazy things, to be quite honest with you. I'm throughout this journey that I've been on for the past few years, I've in my questioning of things, I've really examined and I've turned things around, and I've sort of thrown myself in the deep end on a lot of things. I've examined things like pain and suffering, and sometimes what might seem like bizarre things like boredom, food poisoning. I've even examined food poisoning. Tooth pain is another thing that I've examined. I've been through these things to question them. And I'm telling you the truth. But one of the things that I've examined, and I want to share this with you, is I call it a life hack. Okay, and you get something in your eye, okay, and it's like, you see it on the instructions, and you might get some instructions or something that says, if you get something in your eye, then seek medical advice and blah 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 blah. And I'm a plasterer, okay, and this is something that I discovered a few years ago actually, and it's when you get something in your eye, the first thing that we always do, the first sort of response or reaction, is you close your eye. You clam up, you close your eye, you're trying to see out of your one good eye, you're trying to figure out what's going on and all this kind of stuff. Now, I stumbled on this, call it inner guidance, inner wisdom. Something came to me that made me try this, and it worked. And because it worked the first time, I've then been on to try it on a few other occasions, and it worked. Okay. Now, I'm not suggesting to you that you put something in your eye, right? That's not what I'm saying at all. But what I am saying is, if you should get something in your eye, now, I'm obviously working on building size, and the first thing that you have to do is you go and get an eye bath, and eye baths are harrowing. As far as I'm concerned, they're harrowing, right? You've got to stick your eye in this thing and roll it around and all this kind of stuff, so that your eye washes in this chemical liquid or whatever. It's like putting eye drops in your eye. It's hard work trying to put eye drops in your eye. Yeah, and I know you relate to this. But what I realise is this. And it might sound really bizarre, But I was plastering the ceiling one day, and it was a big ceiling. Okay, it was a big sloped ceiling, sort of pitched ceiling, and it was about 7 meters by 3 meters, and I was plastering it on my own. And I was doing the second coat. If you know anything about plastering, well, I do two coats, two coat plasterer, and I'm halfway through my second coat, and obviously I'm looking up, I'm doing all this and whatever, and a blob of plaster fell in my eye. Well, it didn't fall in my eye, it fell on my eye. I had a blob of plaster that just fell on my open eye, and I scooped all the plaster off. But then something came to me. Now, this has happened before. When I was doing a ceiling again, funnily enough, a scoop of plaster fell in my eye, and to be honest with you, I'm when it comes to health and safety and stuff, yeah, I tend to push the limit sometimes, and I'm not one for wearing goggles. I put goggles on and they distort my vision. I can't see what I'm doing and stuff, so I like to wing it, right? So anyway, the first time it happened, I'm skimming the ceiling, plaster fell in my eye. And that was it. I was rendered useless. I was halfway through the second coat, same thing again on this first ceiling, halfway through the second coat, plaster fell in my eye, and I couldn't finish it. I had to then go back and redo the whole ceiling. So PVA it like hell and redo the whole ceiling. So the second time this happened, sometime later, on another occasion, and same thing, and it was a massive ceiling, plaster fell in my eye. But this time round, something came to me, and I kept my eye open, right? And this is what I realised, is that when you get something in your eye, a sure way of dealing with this issue is, rather than go and get this eye bath and think, keep your eye open, right? Don't shut your eye. That's the first mistake that we make, is we close the eye that something's gone into. Don't close your eye. Keep your eye open, right? And this might sound really crazy. You might be thinking, how can you keep your eye open? Okay, so you might initially just blink the first time, but as soon as you become aware, open your eye, okay? You open your eye and you keep your eye open. Now, the point here is that you have to keep your eye open and keep it fixed. Don't move it around, because, that's the other thing you do. You get something in your eye. Now, obviously, your eyes move together, right? So if you get something in your eye, and you've got to go and get an eye bath, and it's in the health and safety somewhere 3 floors down the other side of the building, so you've got your eye covered up like this, and you're trying to see where you're going, and your other eye is moving, and every time that eye moves, obviously your eye, that you've got something in it, that's moving. And what's happening there, as I sort of see it now, is your eye's getting scratched up with whatever is in there. Okay, so this is, by all means, you don't have to try, you don't have to take my word for it, you can dismiss this if you like, but it's worked for me countless times. Keep your eye open, right? Stare. Don't move your eyes, keep your eyes fixed. Stare at something, right? And obviously, whatever's in your eye is going to sense this as a foreign object, a foreign body in your eye. So what happens is, your eye does its own natural eye bath. Your eye will start to tear. You will start to cry from that eye. Your eye will start to water. And this, in effect, washes your eye. Now, I can say this has happened. I've been through this process. I've done this on numerous occasions now, and I really want to share this with you, I did it when I got this plaster in my eye. This blob of plaster fell on my eye. I scooped everything off my eye, and it still left everything in my eye, and I just kept my eye open, and I stood there staring at the wall for about 30 seconds, and I'm not going to lie to you, 30 seconds. And then after this period, I wiped my eye, and I was fine. There was still a little bit of irritation, but, you come to expect that. But my eye was fine. I actually finished plastering the ceiling. Half an hour later, it was like it never even happened, apart from the big patch of plaster around my outer eye and stuff, but it never happened. So that's a life hack that I wanted to share with you to conclude this video. Your eye is its own natural eye bath. Have faith in this. If you're going to try it, I've tried it with chili pepper. I've had chili on my fingers, and I wipe my and I've kept my eye open. You know, fly goes in your eye, and various other things that have happened. And I've had things fly in my eye. I'm working, doing all various trades that I do, and bits have flown in my eye. Keep your eyes open. Keep your eyes open. Allow your eye to water. Try to avoid looking around, and because the more you look around and stuff, it prevents your eye from watering. It's like your eye has to detect this foreign body, this foreign object, and it has to do something to resolve it, right? It works. Try it for yourself. If you feel confident enough to try it, give it a shot. If you don't, it doesn't matter. Stick with the demonic eye bath and all the rest of it, and you know, it's entirely up to you. All right, that's the end of this video. Thanks for watching again. I'll see you on the next one. Peace.